In late winter, a survey vessel crossed a section of ocean that had been mapped for decades. The crew was not looking for anything unusual. They were checking seafloor depth for a routine cable expansion. The water was calm, the instruments were stable. The coordinates were old, confirmed, and trusted. Then the sonar returned a shape, not a ridge, not a trench, not a wreck, a structure, large, geometric, vertical, something with edges too straight to be natural. It stood from the seafloor like a wall built in darkness in a place where no wall should exist. But when the crew checked every chart, every archive, and every military exclusion record, they found nothing. No listing, no warning, no restricted zone. No map had ever marked it, and when they passed over the same coordinates a second time, the structure was gone. There are places on Earth that still resist human understanding, cold regions, silent deserts. Deep water, buried stone, empty ice, places where signals fail. Places where sound travels strangely, places where the modern world, with all its satellites and sensors and systems, still reaches a limit and stops. We like to believe the planet is known now, measured, catalogued, explained. We have mapped the sky in greater detail than some parts of our own world, but maps are promises. They tell us that what is missing is either small, unimportant, or not there at all. And that is what made this discovery so disturbing. It was not just the shape itself, it was the absence around it. No record of construction, no record of collapse. No record of geological anomaly, no record of anything at all. Only a blank section of ocean and a brief appearance of something impossible. The kind of thing that should not survive in silence for centuries. Or the kind of thing that was never meant to be found. The area was in the far South Atlantic, more than 600 kilometers from the nearest inhabited shore. Cold water, unstable weather, strong currents below the surface. The region was known to researchers for one reason. It was empty. No major shipping route crossed it. No active drilling platform stood nearby, no famous wreck site drew interest. Even scientific traffic in the area was rare. That kind of isolation creates gaps. Not dramatic gaps, quiet ones. A few missed scans, a few outdated charts. A few stretches of seafloor recorded at low resolution decades earlier and never checked again. That was normal. Large sections of deep ocean have been mapped only in broad, indirect detail. From satellites, from old military sweeps, from survey passes that cared more about depth than shape. You can know the outline of a place without knowing what is standing inside it, and depth changes everything. At nearly 3,000 meters down, pressure becomes crushing. Light disappears completely. The cold remains constant. Machines sent into that darkness depend on cables, thrusters, sonar, and weak camera beams that only reveal small pieces at a time. Even modern remotely operated vehicles work like blind hands in deep water. They do not see the whole world. They discover it a few meters at a time. That is why strange things below the ocean are hard to classify. A natural formation can look artificial in broken light. A wreck can collapse into shapes that resemble ruins. A camera can distort scale, sonar can misread an angle. Science knows this. Investigators know this. That is why the first sonar image should have been dismissed. But it was not dismissed because the shape was too clean, and because it appeared where the seafloor should have been flat. The ship that recorded it was called the Ardent Veil. 12 crew, civilian contract, routine operation. At 3:14 in the morning, the night sonar technician noticed a vertical interruption in the return field. At first, he thought it was equipment noise, a spike, a reflection, a processing error caused by thermal layering in the water. He reset the sweep. The shape remained. He narrowed the range. The image sharpened. A flat face rose from the seabed at an angle close to 90 degrees. Beside it stood another line, then another. The screen seemed to show corners, massive corners. Not a single wall, but connected surfaces. A formation with depth and symmetry the officer on duty called the captain. The captain ordered a slow pass over the coordinates. No one on the bridge spoke much after that. They all watched the screen. The structure extended farther than expected. At least 180 meters across by initial estimate. Its upper edge appeared broken, as if part of it had collapsed long ago. Yet the base looked anchored, fixed as though it belonged there. The team marked the location and began checking reference charts. Nothing. International bathymetric records showed only a smooth descent into ordinary seabed. A Defense Archive copy from 30 years earlier showed the same. An undersea cable planning database showed no obstruction. Not even a disputed reading. It was blank water over blank ground. At dawn, the crew prepared for a second pass with higher-resolution equipment. They adjusted the vessel's path, rechecked the coordinates, recalibrated the sonar array. Then they crossed directly above the location. The structure was gone. Not reduced, not blurred. Gone. The seafloor beneath them was almost flat, broken only by low sediment ridges and scattered rock. No wall. No corner, no vertical rise, nothing. The crew repeated the pass 3 more times. The result did not change. If the first image was false, it was the most detailed false reading any of them had ever seen. If it was real, then something vast had appeared below them for less than 3 hours and then vanished without leaving a trace. The incident should have ended there. A strange sonar return, a logged anomaly. A technical note for later review, but one thing kept it alive. During the second sweep, when the structure no longer appeared on sonar, a passive acoustic monitor on board recorded a sound. Low frequency, repetitive, metallic. Not loud, but distinct enough to cut through the constant underwater noise. The pattern repeated every 11 seconds, 3 pulses, pause. 3 pulses again. The acoustic specialist compared it to known sources. It did not match drilling activity. It did not match propeller wash. It did not match whale calls or tectonic noise. It sounded mechanical. Not like a machine in operation, more like resonance. Like metal under stress somewhere far below. That recording was sent to a coastal research institute. From there, the event spread quietly. Not publicly, not at first. A small review team was formed. Hydrographers, marine acoustics experts. To geologists, one ROV operations engineer. Later, a representative from a naval archive office. Their first conclusion was cautious. The structure was likely an artifact of signal reflection caused by a rare layering effect in the water column. The sound was likely unrelated. That was the safe explanation. But safe explanations weaken when details refuse to stay simple. Weather logs showed conditions were unusually stable that night, reducing the chance of distorted sonar. The raw data contained consistent angle returns across multiple sweeps. The reflection pattern suggested hard surfaces, not shifting sediment. And the acoustic signal had begun only after the first detection. 2 weeks later, a research vessel was dispatched to the coordinates, this time with a deep water ROV. The descent took hours. The cameras showed the usual things first. Dark water, marine snow drifting in the beams, nothing beyond the narrow cone of light. Then the seafloor emerged, gray sediment, scattered stone, thin life clinging to the bottom in the stillness. The pilots guided the vehicle along the exact grid where the structure had appeared. At first, they found nothing. But 43 minutes into the search, the front camera caught an elevation change, not a wall, a line. A raised strip of material protruding from the seafloor by less than half a meter. The ROV turned. Another strip crossed it at a sharp angle, then another. They were nearly buried beneath sediment, but their arrangement was unmistakable. Straight edges, parallel runs, intersections too precise for nature. The team widened the search pattern. More lines appeared. Some vanished under layers of silt, others reemerged meters away. It was not a standing structure. It was something buried, something enormous. As if the visible wall from the first sonar pass had been only part of a much larger shape that lay beneath the seabed itself. Then the ROV's lights flickered. The video feed broke into static for less than a second. When the image returned, the vehicle had drifted off course by nearly 8 meters. The thrusters had not responded. The pilot swore he had not touched the controls. A fault report later showed a brief simultaneous error across navigation, depth stabilization, and compass alignment. 3 systems failed together, then recovered together. No clear cause was found. The dive continued. No one wanted to be the person who ended it early. As the hours passed, the evidence became harder to reduce to geology. A manipulator arm brushed sediment away from one exposed edge. Under the silt was not rock. It was a dark material with a dull metallic sheen, not steel. Not any standard marine alloy the onboard team could identify visually. The surface had not corroded the way metal should after prolonged exposure to salt water. It looked worn, but not consumed. As if it had been made to resist time, the cameras moved closer. Along one section, the outer layer carried shallow markings. At first they looked like cracks, then like tool marks, then like symbols. Not letters, not numbers, repeating shapes, narrow and elongated, cut into the material in sequences. Some were deeply scored, others had almost vanished. They did not resemble any language known to the team. The operations engineer requested a still frame. The image froze. On the screen, the markings seemed arranged in rows, measured, intentional. Behind the vehicle, the water remained empty and black. Ahead, the buried lines continued into darkness. Then came the second anomaly. The ROV's rear camera captured motion. A shadow passing above the vehicle. Large, slow, and silent, the pilots assumed it was a fish. But when they replayed the footage, the shape had no visible fins, no reflective eyeshine, no organic movement. It moved like an object drifting with purpose. Its outline remained wrong. Too rigid in some frames, too thin in others. Then it vanished beyond the light. No biological explanation satisfied everyone. But the most disturbing clue was hidden in the data log. The dive software automatically stamped time, depth, heading, and position into every video segment. On 3 clips recorded during the same 6-minute window, the clock did not advance normally. It skipped forward, then backward, then repeated 41 seconds exactly. The video did not visibly loop. The vehicle's motion continued. Sediment drift continued, but the timecode fractured. Digital corruption could explain random damage. It could not easily explain coherent footage tied to broken time markers. The team sent the files for forensic review. No edit was found, no known malware signature, no simple compression failure. It was as if the recording systems had disagreed briefly about when the dive was happening. The second expedition returned a month later with stronger equipment and a larger crew. By then, the story had attracted interest from agencies that did not normally care about civilian sonar anomalies. Questions were asked about military wreckage, Cold War installations, lost prototypes, unauthorized dumping. None of those ideas matched the evidence. Still, the expedition went ahead. This time they scanned a wider radius. What they found changed the scale of the mystery completely. The buried lines were not isolated. They formed a pattern, a grid. Massive interconnected corridors or foundations arranged over nearly 2 square kilometers of seafloor. Some sections were deeply submerged beneath sediment, others rose just enough to disturb sonar. And at the center of the grid stood a depression perfectly circular, almost 60 meters wide, too regular to be natural. The ROV descended into it on the third dive. Its lights traced the inner wall, smooth in some places, stepped in others. At the bottom lay a flat surface coated in dark residue. The manipulator arm collected a sample. Beneath the residue was the same strange material seen above. Then the vehicle found an opening, not a cave, an entrance. Rectangular, narrow, partially blocked by collapsed debris. Inside was empty blackness. The pilots pushed the camera toward it. The beam reached only a short distance. The passage extended beyond view. Then, from somewhere inside that darkness, the acoustic monitor registered a sound. A single pulse, stronger than before, not through the water around the vehicle. From within the structure itself, the ROV froze in place. A second pulse followed, then a third. The same pattern as the first expedition. 3 pulses, pause, 3 pulses again. The pilot whispered that it sounded like a response. No one answered him. As the vehicle edged closer, the front camera caught something fixed to the inner wall. A shape like a panel, smooth, black, reflective. Not grown there, installed ... and for less than 1 second before the feed collapsed into white static, the panel reflected the ROV's lights back at the camera. But it reflected more than the vehicle. Behind the ROV and the reflection stood a second shape. Tall, narrow, upright, something that was not visible in open water. The signal died before anyone could confirm what they had seen. When control was restored, the ROV had lost altitude and was resting on the floor of the depression. Its forward casing was scored with 3 long grooves. Parallel, deep, no impact had been recorded. No collision alarm had sounded. Nothing in the footage showed what caused them. The first theory was geological misidentification. According to this view, the structure was an extremely rare basalt formation fractured into geometric lines by ancient tectonic stress, then partially buried and altered by mineral deposition until it resembled construction. It is the most conservative explanation. It also fails to explain the markings, the apparent metallic composition, the repeated signal pattern, and the reflected shape that appeared where nothing visible existed. The second theory suggested forgotten human origin, a lost Cold War installation. A deep-sea listening post built in secret and erased from public record. That would explain the grid, the materials, and the mechanical pulses, but it raises worse questions. How could a structure of that scale be built so far offshore and then vanish from every map, every shipping warning, every infrastructure archive? And if it was human, why does none of the material match standard marine engineering records from the period investigators expected? The third theory was older, far older. It proposed that the visible grid was not a modern facility at all, but the buried remains of a site that existed before current coastlines, before sea levels rose, before written record reached that far back. A place built in another age and lost beneath water long enough to disappear into geology. To many researchers, that theory sounded impossible. But not as impossible as the data already collected, because whatever was down there did not behave like a ruin. Ruins are silent, ruins do not answer. Ruins do not interfere with instruments. Ruins do not produce fresh grooves on reinforced equipment, and they do not appear on one pass, vanish on the next, then call back from inside a buried corridor. Officially, the site remains unresolved. The sample recovered from the depression was catalogued, then quietly transferred for further analysis. No final public material report was released. The acoustic data was archived, several video segments were restricted. The expedition team was told not to speculate. For a time, nothing more happened. Then, 7 months later, one of the original analysts received a package with no sender information. Inside was a storage drive, no note, no return address. Only a single folder labeled with the expedition coordinates. The drive contained one file, an audio recording 34 seconds long. At first, it seemed to be the same 3-pulse pattern heard before. But when the analyst slowed it down, another layer emerged under the metallic resonance. A voice, thin, distorted, buried in static. Not clear enough to identify, not human enough to dismiss. Just a sequence of sounds repeating under the pulses over and over again. He isolated the cleanest section and sent it to a speech lab. The result came back uncertain. But one interpretation appeared more than once in the notes. Not a sentence, a warning, a location reference, 3 words. Not below. Still here. No one knows who sent the drive. No one knows where the recording was made. And no public expedition has returned to the site since. But on older maritime maps, long before sonar, before satellites, before modern survey grids, there is one strange detail. A blank patch in the same region, unlabeled, avoided. And beside it, on one damaged chart from a forgotten archive, a line written in faded ink, depth uncertain, soundings refused. If something was built there long before our maps began, and if it is still active now in the dark beneath the sea floor, then the real question is not what the structure is. The real question is this: how many other places on Earth were never put on any map because someone already knew they should be left alone?